Welcome back to Story Deep Dive with Rachel and Dana. This is a podcast where two book coaches, editors, and besties discuss books not as readers but as writers. I made my own self laugh to draw inspiration from great books and have lots of laughs along the way. Whether or not Dana's laughing, I'm making myself laugh. So today we are kicking off our discussion of Broken Harbor by Catherine Cowles. We have a ton of great stuff to talk about today and over the next 3 weeks, so there's a lot to look forward to. But Dana has juicy news for me from over at Danja Tales, and I cannot wait to hear what she has going on. Because she hinted in the pre-show to me of like what she's going to be talking about, and I'm dying to find out. I'm not going to bury the lead any further. Dana, tell me what's going on over at Danja Tales.
First of all, every time you say juicy, I'm like, I do? Like,
it makes it sound like there's a big announcement. Dear listener, dear watcher, I'm so sorry. It makes it sound like she's about to drop a big announcement. But if you guys were here for, I think, last month's episodes, Dana was talking about these, like, the way that she's running book club in DTW throughout the summer. And, you know, at the time she was like, this is what we're going to do. I don't know how it's going to go. And she's like, finally had one of those book clubs, and I've been dying to hear how it went. And so I maybe was over dramatic, which is a frequent feature of my honestly general way of being, but I'm just excited. So if I misled the people, I apologize. However, I am very excited to hear about this. So Dana, give us the context and tell us about it.
Okay, when you say it like that, I can get with it. So just as a recap, I mean, here's what's always so hilarious about the way that we record these podcasts is the fact that for you it could have been last week, and for us it could have been months ago. So who knows? We don't know. Or at least, listen, I'm gonna speak for myself. I don't know. But towards the end of first quarter, something like that, we did a workshop where we covered my 3-book system for learning your niche, which is having a GOAT, which is your greatest of all time, having your evergreen, which is a book that shows you some of the things that are just common in your niche and how they have evolved from the GOAT, and your chart topper, which is a current release that is across all 3 of the books. What it allows you to do is sort of lock in your niche and also to see how it's changed and it's evolved. And so in our summer reading series, if you will, we decided by vote, because we're going to do movies or the triple threat summer.
Yeah, that's right.
Because they're called the triple threat. That's what we call it. Is we decided that we're going to have a triple threat summer. And so unlike in the past, a book club is usually we have one book, everybody's reading that one book, and we come back and have a discussion. Well, in this case, everybody is reading a different book. And first of all, thankfully, the people in my community and my clients are like, they always call me their fearless leader, right? Like, they're going in here blind and just trusting that I'm like, this is going to be good. I'm telling you, this is going to be good. Lean in, do the work, because usually your GOAT is the hardest book to find. It's the hardest book to find because it's the oldest book. And the better pick that you have, the better foundation you have as you move forward. It gets easier as you get current. So we had the first book club of doing the GOAT, and it went so good. So many people messaged me and was like, okay, I didn't know where you were going with this, but I was just like, because one of the things that that inspired the triple threat was that as I was working with clients and as I was plotting for different genres, I had to learn the reader expectations for those genres quickly, right? And I had to develop a system to be able to do it. I could be plotting a romance, then I could be plotting a YA, I could be plotting a romantasy, I could be plotting a mystery, right? It just depends on the client. And so I had to have a way to come at this. And now what this turns into is honestly this very interesting spectrum of, you could be someone that has sort of decided that you want to write romance because it's one of the biggest genres and you're not a huge romance reader, but you've made this decision as a creative. And now you got to figure out what that means. It's not just those dirty books that you're not supposed to read. You got to, right? Or it could be a writer who is writing, let's say they've been writing contemporary romance and they've decided they want to go a little bit darker. They want to have morally gray main male characters. What does that actually mean? What does it mean to get that information on the page? And so coming into the conversation and having a dozen or so people having read different books, we even had some people that read the same book, because one of the things that I did was leading up to it, I asked them to post the book that they selected.
Nice.
Because what I knew it would happen, but what we found to be true is people would read something and they thought it was it because they picked it, and then they actually read the book and it was like, actually it's not. Ding, 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 ding. How many times, how many times that happens? When we're in mentorship, I'm reading the books with you. But if we're in community, I'm not reading everyone's picks. So you have to do a better job of it. Versus when you're in mentorship with me, I can tell you before we even start reading it, no, this is not it. Here's why. Well, when you are doing this on your own, you really have to be discerning. And so people having read books or found books that they wouldn't have ever picked, but because it met the criteria, they went for it, and they're like, oh my goodness, this was so much better. And this helped me to identify X, Y, and Z. And I think the biggest sort of, because it's like, I could talk about a million things, but being that you weren't there for the conversation, it may feel like, oh my God, you're going on and on. But I'll say this. What I find to be true when it comes to the general advice to read more, right? Which is not really, I mean, it is the advice, but it really isn't as helpful without some parameters. Or if you are underway and you're realizing you want to take a detour, you want to do something different, but you're not quite sure how to do it. This is sort of was the room where people were able to do something that they haven't been able to do before, which is begin to articulate what that is, whether it is what they don't want or what they want, what the differences were that they saw in the characters, even to the point where there's one student, and absolutely love her to death, but she is so literal. And had we not worked for a season in a one-on-one capacity, I wouldn't have realized this, right? She's so literal that I'm like, okay, this is what you see, but don't do this, right?
Yeah.
Don't feel like, okay, all right, I like Fourth Wing. Gotta have some dragons. Gotta have a girl that has, that has a weak body. Gotta have a hot guy who's already like, no, this is not how we do it. And then hearing from the rest of the students what they liked, they didn't like, what they took away, what they learned from. People was like, wait a minute, what book was that again? Wait, what was that? The chat was on fire, right?
Yeah.
And ultimately, when we got to the end, because when you do your triple threat, my advice is never to just do one for all. You can do it with 3 books, and this system totally works. But if you have more than one, you are on fire, especially when it comes to your GOAT, because it establishes your foundation. It establishes the beginning, if you will.
Yeah.
So people then having more than one, baby, you are on fire. And now we can really begin to chop it up.
Yeah.
And at the end, people was like, I'm so glad, because I kept saying, y'all, don't sleep on this. Listen, it's summertime. People are vacationing. The reason why we sort of have a low lived is to have a low lived. Yeah. And I'm telling you, listen, just take the book with you to the beach. Take the book.
Come on, it's a steamy romance. It's gonna be great on the beach. Okay, it's not gonna be work. It's gonna be pleasure.
Girl, no, other than you looking around to see if people know what you're reading, but
Get a
You
little
know,
paper bag that goes over the, those old book covers.
like you did when we were reading. What book was you reading?
It was Dead Until Dark. Okay. Okay, we're gonna go super brief interjection with the story. Okay, listen, squad. If you are listening on audio, I'm gonna apologize now because you're not gonna be able to see the book cover. But on YouTube, you can see the book cover. So when we read for the first time "Dead Until Dark," this is the version that I have. It's the very much like, this was an HBO special. And obviously, I mean, so for the listener, you've got just the bottom half of a lady's face with very red lips and her tongue sticking out to wipe off a little bit of blood. It's very sexual looking. Versus, if you look at Dana's, Dana, go ahead and describe your cover so it gives you speaker.
First of all, my cover is creepy in a different way. It's more about the typography than the image. I mean, first of all, whoever approved this, can we please have a side conversation?
That's the funniest cover for something that's like, kind of steamy, like Dead Until Dark. That is a hilarious cover.
Listen, and this is what makes it so bad. I'm so sorry, Charlene Harris. We loved this book. But the fact that he got that, like, what is that called? Widow's Peak on the vampire. Like, who did this? But anyways, and the fact that they're flying. Anyways, my cover has supposedly a vampire, and it has a Sookie like wrapped up in, he's sort of levitating like as if he's flying, but it's mostly typography. It doesn't feel sensationalized or sexual in nature. But Rachel was like chillaxing by the pool.
Yes, this was because we were literally reading it in the summer and we were going to study it. And this was before the podcast. And the place that I lived, it had a pool that was like part of the apartment complex. And I was going to read it. And I had to take this book to the pool. And I was like, how do I read this? And not everybody be looking at me with my nose in a book that is like, this clearly has sex in it. Like, it's like, and so I would like, when you like flip over so that your back is facing the sun. And I was like, I'll just lay it flat on the little chair, like or like, brace it against my knees or something so that you can't see the cover. So yes, this is, where your clients might have experienced, or your students might have experienced a little bit of that this summer, where they're like, "Don't look at the cover. There's nothing to see here."
I don't know if anything is as racy as that cover. I don't think
that's true. Not even the hot man, right? With like a shirtless, because it's just like a shirtless guy versus a mouth and a tongue, and it's a lot going on.
Girl, all of it. But yeah, so I would say in the end. It made it so that asking them to not just read the book and not just answer questions, but to look at it analytically and to begin to have a moment to begin to sort of almost like decode what they were experiencing, what they were reading. And I mean, to the point where at the end of the conversation, us having a great sort of spin-off about the difference between steamy romance and contemporary romance. Because now, as they're starting to read these goats, because these are older books, now you're beginning to question something that if you were reading all contemporary or reading all modern contemporary romance, that it almost always feels as if it's all steamy. And now when you're reading some of these older ones, you're realizing, oh no, it's not. Here are some of the differences. And so beginning to ask yourself those questions. So they are loving it. I'm so glad I've been vindicated. And now it's one more thing of like, do as I say. Just do it.
Just racking up the, like, when Dana says do it, to do it.
Just do it. Listen, I'm not going to ask you to do something, first of all, because then I got to do it. I'm not going to ask you to do something I have to do too. And even just as the final note, like even for myself, like I decided to pick my goats and because for a couple of my pen names, because I want to do some different things after I finish this series. And when I did it, I ended up, they were great stories to pick, but they did not do what I wanted them to do.
Yeah.
and giving, it's almost like you being able to articulate why it didn't work is
Yes.
just as helpful as
Oh,
having a story that does work.
for sure.
And beginning to do that and being able to explain that and be able to use that languaging and that understanding to ask a question in community or on a Q&A, like it has
Mm-hmm.
this sort of ability to permeate all types of conversations around your role as a storyteller and
Yeah.
how you see your stories. And so, yeah, so basically, you were right. It was juicy, but we got it in. So yeah, definitely. So now we finished that, and in the month of August, we'll be doing our um evergreen, which this is when
Yes.
everyone is so excited. But we had so many people that are going back and doing more reading more goats. So I think it's
Yeah.
going to be very interesting when we get to the evergreen, what that feels like and how you're able to compare and contrast that experience.
That means that during our next month's episodes, we're gonna have to check in with Dana and find out how the Evergreen book clubs went, and we need to like I'm saying this to everybody in the audience as though they're gonna like email me
Yeah.
and be like, hey Rachel, don't forget to ask about this thing whenever you podcast next. But that means that's gonna go top of list for stuff that we're gonna need to talk about.
Exactly. It is. And so what about you? What do you have going on over there at Story Cipher?
Yeah, so at the time of this recording, so by the time this comes out, it'll be roughly a week or two ago. I spoke at ProWritingAid's novel summer camp, and so for anyone listening, at at the at the time of this recording and probably when this comes out as well, you can find the replay if you sign up for like ProWritingAid's novel summer camp. They keep all of the replays, so if you're like, oh man, I didn't know that was happening, you can still kind of get in there and catch some of those replays. But I gave a talk about how to structure a crime story, and that was I so enjoyed giving that presentation because we talk about this a lot on the podcast, but I got to go real like deep into like act by act. This is what crime stories are doing, right? As we are building them, because crime stories are really easy any story is easy to feel like a flat line, but I find that crime stories can be especially easy because they're centered on an investigation, which is a search for information, right? And so it's really easy for the story to kind of feel like we went to this place and we learned this thing, and then we went to this place and then we learned this thing. And you do that over and over again until eventually the story's over. And we're like, okay, we found out who
Mhm.
did it. And I've even read crime novels where, the information gets increasingly more gruesome, or the deaths get increasingly more gruesome. And that does not translate to an increase in tension. It does not make the story feel like it is escalating. It just kind of feels like I'm wandering from place to place and kind of like, ew, ew, ew. Like we go from scene to scene. I'm just sort of like, well, that's gross. And that's the extent of my experience. And so really getting to talk about, we've talked about this on the podcast before, how you escalate a crime story using the meaning of the information itself, right? Because
Mm.
the whole point of a crime story is the puzzle. What we want to do is solve the puzzle alongside the protagonist. And so when we're focusing on building the meaning and building the picture of the truth of the crime and who's responsible, and at intervals throughout the story, like sort of disrupting that picture because the protagonist is wrong, that's really where that interest and tension is coming from. And so getting to like do this presentation to really map out what that looks like and sort of how you accomplish it, and also like where you've seen it in crime novels before, right? Where it's like, often at midpoint it looks kind of like this, or it looks like this at All Is Lost. Was really like, it was such a satisfying presentation to give and like topic to cover. So yeah, so that's what I did recently, and I really enjoyed it. And as far as I knew from the chat, everybody enjoyed it as well. So yeah, so that's what I've been doing lately while running the academy, and clients going in. I had a client just publish his first book in at the beginning of July, which was like a huge, I mean, obviously it was a huge milestone. And so as soon as he got some like special edition leather bounds made, so when on our when we record next and I have my copy, I'll be sure to show it on camera because they're really, really cool. So yeah, more of the same.
Awesome. I can't wait to see it. The other thing I was going to say that I find that whenever you have this opportunity to go back to the basics, that it's really great. I mean, as someone who teaches it a lot and you're talking about it a lot, because you can get hyper focused, but a lot of answers can be, or a lot of questions can be answered just by understanding the rhythm and flow of story, period.
So true.
It's just, and I always tell people, they're like, I'm like, just work with me. It's almost like you learning to dance.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just come on, get some rhythm behind it first.
Yeah.
Once you get that rhythm and you get that rock, then we start adding on that extra stuff. But until until you get that rhythm, it's hard to drop down, or it's hard to understand why this section is so important. Like us talking about, the breakup scene, or why, because even if it's just, understanding the rhythm and then beginning to use that rhythm to help you at every stage of that process, plotting, writing, editing, because understanding that rhythm helps you to know, it almost helps to begin to train your intuition. Yep. When you know something is off, to begin to figure out, okay, wait a minute. Now I know I'm in Act 3 and here are my bookends for Act 3.
Yep.
And here, listen, this is why every time I do the boot camp, because it never fails that students are like, you've taught this so many times and I still learn something over and over again, because you're going back to the basics. And so I'm glad. I hope that they just ate it up, because that was a rare treat. And I hope you get to do it again.
Thank you. Actually, I just like a few weeks ago, I had one of my students in the academy. She had a really similar experience to exactly what you were just talking about, where she was kind of stuck on a portion of her story, and she'd been kind of like really spinning her wheels about it and trying to like, map out stuff and like, what are the solutions? And then after a while of like working the problem, she realized like, oh, I'm just having like a basic 4-act structure and like order in which I'm like closing out my threads problem, right? It was like it was just foundational stuff. And what's so amazing about that is that it means that like the solution to so many story problems aren't actually in some super, high context skill that you need to develop, that you have to like ascend to. It's actually, it lives at like the foundation of how stories work. And so, it is both that simple and that difficult, but that it's not some far off skill for the elite, writer or whatever. But so many of the solutions actually come from our foundational principles. And I think that's honestly kind of encouraging, kind of nice.
It is encouraging, because I think the thing about it is you begin to realize how much you learn and relearn. The more that you are writing and you are experiencing story, the more that you hooks that you have to hang that information on, and you go from being very general to what we'll talk about today, right? Getting more specific, because you have sort of absorbed that rhythm, and now you're able to implement it and execute at a higher level, because you are proficient in it.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go ahead and dive into our overview for Broken Harbor by Catherine Cowles. We have an extra special summary for you guys. I'm being so sassy, guys. I'm sorry. I'm kind of having a bit of Schadenfreude, because so for our summary for this month, we've just been pulling the book blurb, right? The back cover copy. But in this case, the back cover copy is written in first person. And so when Dana reads it, it sounds extra dramatic, and I've been having a good laugh literally every episode at this experience. So everybody, please enjoy the summary from Dana, and then we'll dive into our discussion.
First of all, Rachel thinks she funny. Every time she gets ready to say this, and watch Dana fall in love with Coulson. Okay,
this is gonna come back to bite. There's gonna be some episode. It's gonna be like a crossover pick or something, and I am gonna be the one, and it's gonna be worse than this one. This one really isn't that bad. It's gonna be something real wild, and I'm gonna have to read it out loud, and we're all gonna be uncomfortable.
You gonna make me pick a book just so you have to read the blurb. I'm not gonna do that. I wouldn't do that to her, but I would think about it. Okay. All right, here we go. Since the moment our lives fell apart, the only thing that mattered was making a good life for my son, a life where he was happy and safe. I just never expected to find that safety with a hockey player known for his brutal dominance on the ice and his recklessness off it. But Cope Colson is so much more. The gentle way he makes sure we're okay, the playful care he shows my son, the way he truly sees me. When my life comes apart yet again, it's Cope picking up the pieces. Now we're living in his house, eating his incredible chef worthy meals, and it's not just my son who's falling, it's me. Because when Cope touches me, I lose all sense. I'm no longer thinking about staying safe. I'm thinking about how my skin ignites with every glance, how I come undone with the barest brush of his fingertips, and when we give into temptation, I'm lost. But Cope has secrets, and so do I. And when the forces from our past emerge from the shadows, there's nothing they won't do to end our happiness once and for all.
Excellent. Thank you for that summary, Dana. You guys know this is the last episode that we like record at the very end of the whole series, and so Dana is celebrating right now that she does not have to do that again.
About Cope Colson's brushing up his fingers. I'm like, are you serious?
So outside of how the brush of Cope Colson's fingers ignite your skin, a few things that we're going to do today. So one, Dana's going to just give us a little bit of context for like what is going on in this story to kind of catch us up on when we kind of get into the story, what's going on a little bit sort of beyond the blurb that we got. We also are going to talk about what is really good about this story, even if you're not a romance writer, right? Because this story has some really, really great structural things going on that are useful for anybody. We're also going to have a little bit more discussion about romantic suspense in particular. So this book has a romantic suspense element, but it's also right small town kind of cozy, and she does a really nice job of like weaving those together. So I just want to kind of like tease out from and get Dana's perspective on, you know, romantic suspense as a subgenre, and talk a little bit more about what we expect from romantic suspense. And then we'll just kind of touch on some things that we have coming up in our discussion, including some talk about prologues and first chapters, which we have a really nice discussion coming up on that. So Dana, do you want to kind of lead us in with some of the basics of what's going on in this story when we kind of show up?
Mm-hmm. Okay, first of all, I gotta start off with caveats. I always gotta start off with caveats. I feel like when Rachel talks about this stuff, she is super heady. She just got all the beautiful words. I'm gonna just tell y'all how it is, okay? The old school used to say like a TI is, okay? So the first thing that we're gonna talk about is how this story sort of comes to be, and I think a lot of this will iron out a little bit when we talk about the subgenre or the category of it in general. But it plays a lot into sort of this juxtaposition that we have in this story, which is you have Sutton, who is a single mom, and to a little boy named Luca. And when we encounter her at the beginning of the story, we encounter her at a very rough time in their lives that exposes her to danger, not of her doing. And it sort of starts off this book in a way that makes you feel like, wait a minute, like, wait, what am I reading? And which goes along with what we've been talking about in so many episodes of like setting up reader expectations, setting up the promise of the story. And then as we move forward, we sort of dive deep into this small town romance with this single mom and this hockey player who's having some issues on the ice and off with publicity and how he's been handling things. We find ourselves folded into this found family, and you experience Sutton trying her absolute best to create a sense of normalcy and safety for her and her son, all while falling for this guy who's everything that she has vowed to stay away from. But they find themselves in this sort of rhythm, if you will, of being exactly the person that the other needs to really come on the other side of what they're experiencing and the wounds that we see them grow from in the story. But all the while that when we're sort of steeped in this romance, we are not forgetting that this is a suspense. And
Hmm.
so one of the things that you'll hear us say over the next few episodes is how much we are enjoying the romance, but we never forget how the story starts off, right? We don't forget that it's sort of like this cloud that is over them, and it makes it so that this story from the jump has these life or death stakes that almost seems at odds with the
Hmm.
small town romance vibe. She owns a
Yeah.
bakery, right? She's making cookies
Yeah.
and cupcakes. But to have these life or death stakes that are attached to the story and that um allows us to go through this story and see a romance and a suspense match
Hmm.
pace and unfold. And
Yeah.
so this is sort of what we find ourselves like wrapped in immediately when we
Hmm.
get into Broken Harbor.
Yeah, and one of the things just like structurally about this story that I found really effective. You guys hear me, if you've listened to the podcast um for any length of time, you will hear me talk a lot about the order in which we open and close story threads,
Hmm.
right? And it's really important because it establishes the kind of correct pacing of the promises that you've set up and making sure that you're closing them so that it doesn't feel like especially by the end of the story, the reader doesn't feel confused about like, wait, what was the climax of this story? What was this story actually supposed to be about, right? And so the order in which she kind of opens up the suspense thread and then opens up the romance and then closes those out in that, right? She closes the romance first and then closes the suspense kind of around it. And then, of course, we get like all of that just nice resolution at the very end. It makes a really nice, like, again, it makes that prologue even more important, right? Because it starts us on this note so that the very last thing that we close out at the climax is the thing that she opened first, and then the romance kind of
Hmm.
exists right inside of it. So it's really really nicely nested into the plots are really nicely nested. um I wonder if we could, oh, do you want to say something?
Yeah, and I think part of that goes to the conversation that we also have when it comes to the fact that these plots and subplots in the story, how they're laid out, because
Yeah.
what sort of goes with something that I say I feel like a million times is that this is a great story to see that done, whether
Yes.
you want to write a romantic suspense or not. Being able to say, this is what they keep talking about, and now you get to see it work out really cleanly,
Yeah.
is a great example of what the way that you can apply that same approach to whatever story you're working on.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. This book has a really nice, like, we talk all throughout the next 3 weeks about the kind of sort of quote unquote story threads and
Hmm.
the way that they are right kind of neatly braided into each other, but they are distinct enough that you can see them in action, right? So when you're in a scene, you're like, oh, I see this thread at play, I see this thread at play, and you can kind of pick them out even though they're really neatly interwoven with each other. So none of them feel tangential or like we've ambled off in some other direction and we're like, why are we here?
Hmm.
But you can still pull them out as being distinct from one another. And this actually goes to like the facets of this story that are great even if you're not a romance writer, right? So the order in which she opens and closes her threads, as well as the distinctiveness of those threads, right? Sutton trying to run the bakery and get her life together. Cope's life as a hockey player and trying to kind of get almost like rehabilitate his reputation, and all of the different pieces that kind of come together in the story. You can see them so clearly, and so that makes it a really great example of how you take those and you weave them together.
Hmm. It's also a great way to see having two genres merged, right? Whenever you say something like romantic suspense, we are saying that these two things are
Yeah.
equally important. It's not a subplot. And
Hmm.
so seeing both of them have the full rhythm if you will, of like what we were talking in the, opening of the show, the full rhythm of that genre, but happening in tandem is really important to see. You see the same thing when you think about romantic fantasy, or
Mm-hmm.
you could even say a romantic thriller,
Mm-hmm.
a cozy mystery, I guess in some ways. But the point is, we see that as well. And I kind of feel like this is one of those stories where you can just get a whole lot of value from watching the story unfold, whether this is your genre or not, because she
Yeah.
just does it in a really great, it's almost clean way, even
Mm-hmm.
though there's a lot that she's making look simple. That's
Yes.
not. And that's almost, I mean, it is. I think those are some of the best stories to study. And then when you really start studying, I'm like, oh no, she did a whole bunch right here.
Yeah.
But for this reason, we kind of wanted to talk about it now, because even if you're not a romance writer, or even if you
Mm-hmm.
don't want to do a romantic suspense, this is one of those stories that you still will want to pick up. And it's a great audiobook, right? That you
Yeah.
could just listen to it and be able to clearly see those lines, see how she's building it, see how she's sort of not even hiding the lead, like it's still there in little subtle ways. And how you still wrap it in something that so is a steamy romance. It is a steamy
Yeah.
small town romance.
Yeah, absolutely. And um again, even just if whether you're a romance writer or not, or if you're a romance writer of a different, sort of subgenre, seeing how you manage multiple elements that feel like they all belong together, right? They all serve their own unique purpose in the story, and they all make the story better, right? So one of the
Yeah.
things, what we will talk about in plot is about how those different threads give you variety within your story and give you lots of different angles to kind of come from. But you, of course, want those to be anchored in your plot so that they are all relevant. And this is what she has in this story. And she really uses it to great effect. And you can see it really, really clearly in play in this one.
hmm the other couple things that I'll say that we do bring up and talk about is we also see that in tropes, right?
Hmm.
In this story, she has tropes that are not just in label. It affects how the story moves forward. So if you're
Yeah.
someone who's like, you feel like, oh no, I don't want to use tropes, or you're someone that feels like, well, everyone is using the same tropes, or I don't want to use the same tropes as someone else, you really are able to see like how she took those tropes and how she allow it to infuse in the story, and how it affects the way they move forward, the way they interact and engage with each other, the internal conflicts that they have between each other, and the difference between what they feel like they want versus what they think they need
Yeah.
versus the situation that they find themselves in. And so we see that, and all while, I feel like you took something that could feel like at the time when it came out kind of cliche. It's a hockey
Hmm.
romance. Like, what is a hockey romance? That's what you would
Yeah.
think. But
That was a
you
question
see,
I asked when you
you
suggested the
did.
book. I was like, I'm sorry, a hockey romance? What does that
Exactly.
mean?
And
Means
now
it's
you know.
exactly what it sounds like.
Exactly. And you see that. And even to the point where she made it so that the hockey in it
Mhm.
is it disrupts her womb, right?
Yeah.
It's something that she wants nothing to do with. So I feel like what you're going to see as we move forward is that we unpack this more. But I hope in us having this conversation now that it sort of removes the thing of like, well, that's not my genre, that's not my
Hmm.
thing.
Yeah.
Because this is one of those stories where, yeah, not a 100%, but it's enough where you may want to lean in,
Yeah.
because it just sort of is kind of given this fundamental flex. And
Yeah.
so I think it's really great at doing that, and it's just a good solid read
Yeah.
without being too heavy. It's not, I
Hmm.
mean, there's some moments, but it's not too heavy. It's an easy, air quote, easy
Yeah.
read, while still packing a major punch.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, because there are life and death stakes kind of at work in the story. So
hmm
can you give us like a little bit of a primer on romantic suspense, what it is and what we tend to like expect from romantic suspense? For, yeah.
This is where Rachel and her fantastic definitions. Okay. So here's what I will say. Okay. That first of all, it is still wholly a love story and it's still wholly a suspense. And usually what you have in your suspense is that there's some sort of central threat, right? That is, and a lot of times it's going to be life or death. And it's usually a high stakes, right? External danger, which is going to be a little bit different than if you have something like things we never, well, technically kind of did in a little bit on the suspense, things we never got over, when we talked about that, when it's just like her trying to be not a people pleaser and him trying to get over, some of the things that happened with his parents and his father's relationship, or his interpretation of how his father handled the loss of his mother. Okay, which is not a small, it's not a small fry, right? But it's not the same thing as like we could be dead, right? It's not the same in that regard. Maybe emotionally so, but not physically so. And so when you have a romantic suspense, those two things come together, and you want it to be in a way that it is inseparable, right? That they are equally important, and that you have both this emotional vulnerability while having this danger, real world stakes, all while still getting to their happily ever after that we get from a romance, right? And those two things come together, that they have to get over both things, their aversion to love, and whatever those real world dangers are, to be able to have their happily ever after. Now, one of the other things that we sort of talked about before the show, when we are doing our sort of debriefing, if you will, is that you're going to find in romantic suspense that there are all types of stakes. I don't know if it's as clear cut. I mean, I'm sure someone will write a book on it at some point. Who knows? Maybe I will, which I doubt. But there are different ways, right? There can be, if you are doing organized crime, or if you're doing like a mafia, or you're doing something like if you have people that are in some sort of law enforcement, right? I'm thinking of
Cold and Deadly.
Tony Anderson. That's right, Cold and Deadly. There are still life or death stakes, but the fact that it was in cahoots with their professions, and it did eventually affect them personally, right? Because it was a suspense. So you can find that those external stakes can differ as far as the source, but it would still be sort of considered a romantic suspense. Now, when you get to things like Amazon categories and things like that, you may get a little bit more specific, just because it's helpful to the reader. But I don't know if I would say there is a huge difference categorically, other than the fact that the person's profession, or where we find them, like regular schmegular versus a professional FBI agent or whatever, the dynamics of it would be purely based on their situation. Right. The actual progression of the story would feel similar, but the way that it shows up would be different. And so here, the biggest thing that we're finding is that we have regular people, but because of the way that it opened up and the source of that sort of inciting moment, that we realize that Sutton has secrets, as she says in the blurb, but there's baggage there, right? With her ex and his life, and how the things kind of went left for him, and how that comes back around to affect them all. And she does this in a very beautiful way, because it's not a singular thing, which makes it even better, because when you get towards that climactic moment and you can bring all those threads to sort of converge, it just makes the whole thing so yummy. And so that's what you have in a little bit of a nutshell, but kind of not, and when you have a romantic suspense.
Well, and one of the things that we talk about in the coming weeks, and one of the things that you've pointed out, is that that's where this story kind of like differs from what we typically expect from a romantic suspense, right? So romantic suspense is, from what I'm gathering, is largely defined by the presence of that type of external threat, right? That's bringing in kind of our life and death stakes. And now that's, we have life and death stakes in a lot of times things like romantasy. So it's not only romantic suspense that has life and death stakes, but that's
Mm-hmm.
one of the features that we see in a romantic suspense. And we have that in this story, but with the sort of like, it's a little bit unusual that it's just regular people in this kind of small town context. So we've sort of combined two things that we don't see together as often, which is romantic suspense and small town romance, or like, yeah, small town.
Well, I wouldn't go as far to say that. I just feel like this is what she's doing really well, because you will. This is what she writes. Almost all of hers are small town. You find though it would be it's a niche, a sub niche in itself, that
Mm,
people like having that sort of dynamic. I mean, think about it. It
yeah,
almost is like having a cozy, but with the heat on the page.
yeah,
And so I would say it's not that it's uncommon, but I think she just does this really well. And it's not as common as seeing like a mafia, right? In a mafia, you wouldn't normally or classically or commonly call it a romantic suspense, but it is,
yeah.
because usually the external threat and the stakes are being brought on by their profession, which is
Hmm.
being a part of organized crime. And
Hmm.
usually in the case of organized crime, like, we're not just trading cupcakes, right? We're
Yeah,
trading bullets.
right.
So it's sort of like, just, those external stakes, just, it helps to sort of fold it for the writer, of course, and also for the reader, being that readers are selecting it for that. I think another
Hmm.
part that I would point out in that regard would be, it would also be helpful because you will find that there are some readers that they don't want to deal with something that is illegal. They don't want to deal
Hmm.
with organized crime. They don't want to
Yeah,
sort of sensationalize bullets flying, or even in the case of a lot of mafia, you don't deal with the true consequences. Like, no one's going to
right.
jail, right?
Yeah.
Right? They're just not, that's not how this works.
Yeah.
Versus in this case, what is being done is shaped around, we're extending our suspension of belief, but not much.
Yeah.
Because what happens here, you could see how that could
Hmm.
really happen. And I think so, I
Yeah.
feel like those are the sort of levers, if you will, that she's
Yeah.
utilizing when we say romantic suspense here. And I would say the final thing is, the thing that she just does so well is she manages to have both, and she
Yeah.
manages to still have the warmth and the coziness and
Hmm.
the family dynamic and the family meals and kids running around, chasing a hockey puck, because you
Yeah.
could see it in your mind, with the fact that bullets are flying and the fact
Hmm.
that someone could get shot and that this could end. And if this ends, did I get to live my life the way that I really wanted to live it?
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes this feel very tangible, and not
Hmm.
like, oh, we're playing cop and robbers for the sake of a book, you know?
Right. Yeah. Where, yeah, because, I think, and again, this is one of those things where she does it well, so she makes it look easy, but it's so
Hmm.
easy to sort of mistakenly be like, oh, I need to, my book needs it, maybe the book needs a little extra, or I need to, escalate the stakes. So, just like we were talking about with crime, I'm just gonna like jam in, some kind of, antagonist that kind of comes in, and it feels like it's superimposed from the outside versus this sense that this is Sutton's real life that is coming to bear, like it's her past coming to bear on her present, and
Hmm.
her having to reckon with that, and giving us 100% of both of the romantic suspense and all of the cozy. And those, like, again, I don't associate those things with each other, romantic suspense and cozy. So the fact that she was able to combine them so effectively is a testament to the skill with which she did this. And again, it goes back to what you talked about with the tropes, where the tropes that she chose, yes, are popular, but they have a meaningful place and impact on the story, the same way that the suspense, again, doesn't feel like it's just something she kind of plopped on there, but it has a meaningful role and purpose. And like, it has a meaningful role in the plot and in the purpose of the story and the journey that Sutton herself has to go on, and that Cope has to go on as well.
Hmm. And I would also say, in a lot of these situations, it, it's It sort of just always reminds me of spectrums, right?
Hmm.
It's sort of like when you talk about crime stories, it is in spectrums, and her deciding that this is the spectrum of this particular story, because
Hmm.
usually you're sort of redefining that for every story that's in a series, right? In a
Hmm.
romance, every story doesn't have to be, but you may decide that in the state of this series, since I do write romantic suspense, all of them will be on the life or death spectrum, but this is the way that it's at play in this individual story. And I
Hmm.
feel like one of the things that sort of stood out to me is the fact that we wholly got the way that their relationship is evolving while
Hmm.
never fully taking our finger off the pulse of the danger. And
Hmm.
that's sort of I think is one of those things that she just did well here.
Yeah.
And it made it so that someone like me, I want to read all the rest of the books in the series, right?
Yeah.
I want to see how she decides to disperse that, and whether this is just how she does it, or if this is just the way that she did it for this particular book, or the way she's doing it for this series. All in
Hmm.
all, I think what it allows us to do is see both of those things working out, and begin to take some really great inferences and notes from how
Yeah.
she does it.
Yeah, well, and that's actually kind of a great springboard for at least the last thing on my list, but we'll make sure that we cover all, everything that we wanted to get to in the episode. But one of the ways that she does this is through her prologue and first chapter. And we'll talk a lot more about it in plot, but really, the use of the prologue, which introduces that suspense thread, right? That is giving us something to hang on to when we jump into that first chapter and we're like, we're in a small town in a bakery. This is a really big change from where we were in the prologue. And it's so important for setting up those expectations and letting the prologue really do some serious work for establishing the tone, because there is kind of a tonal shift when we get into that first chapter. But she does a
Mhm.
really nice job of like drawing through like some breadcrumbs from the prologue so that we know that this prologue is important. She didn't just forget about it in, the first chapter, and then she's like, actually, I'm telling a different story, right? And then opening the first chapter in a small town. And that is one of the really key ways that she set up the suspense thread and then was able to continue that by continuing to drop the breadcrumbs throughout. So, like you said, we never lose track of the fact that there is an external threat out there.
Mhm. And y'all will hear me talk more about this when we talk about it in plot, but I would say this here: if you've heard any other um any other of the episodes when Rachel was just like, something was just off, and you didn't say it that way, but
I
really
tried to
it's
say it
the
nice.
exactly. But it really comes down to, like, what is the promise of
Hmm.
what this story is really about, and that you don't want to go into something, especially because the cover does not tell you anything. I don't have it around me. I was looking around to see if I had it around me. The cover does not tell you that. It just looks like pretty, like, abstract. It's light blue and purple and white. Like, it's not dark, black and
Yeah.
white, or
Not even the colors we expect on,
exactly.
a romantic suspense.
No. And so part of this is managing expectations. And what she does, which we've talked about also, which is your setups and payoffs. Oh,
Hmm.
she set that baby up.
Yeah.
And to the point where, I mean, is why we have it here in the first place. I read it a
Hmm.
couple of pages in Barnes and Noble, and I was like, wait a minute. Like, wait a minute, what is this? And so what this does, it kind of can do it in a way that feels like it's kind of it's, I don't want to say it's over the top. I don't want to say it's dramatic, but it captures your attention,
Hmm.
and you almost immediately have to say, do I want to keep reading this?
Hmm.
And that could be one of those things where you feel like, oh, you have thoughts whether it's good or bad. Here, it does a clear job of saying, is this a story that I want to read? And do I want to keep going? And when you keep
Yeah.
going, you go in the next chapter and you're just like, wait a minute, what just happened again? And then when it gets to the end, you're like, oh, it just all sort of settled in together. So it does a great job for setting up. It does a great job for setting up expectations. It does a great job of helping to manage and maintain that spectrum of what to expect. And it also does a great job for us to understand, even when we encounter Sudden in those first chapters afterwards, of what she is up against. And it's like this invisible thing, right? Because the reality is, and this is sort of adjacent, but you know me, I like to like go back. Let's do airplane view because it helps you to understand the on the page a little bit better. The remedy that Sudden picks after that prologue is hide. And who can live a full, happily ever after, I'm living my blessed life if you are hiding? No one.
Yeah.
So you think this is a solution, but the reality is it's not.
Yeah.
But if somebody told you that, she gonna be mind your business. This ain't your life. Like, you know what I'm saying? Listen, that's what would happen. And this is what tells us why this story, why now? Because somebody bumps into her place where she is okay with playing small if it means that we're safe.
Yeah.
Or you realize that playing small still doesn't keep you safe.
Yep.
And this is, again, like the spectrum that we get to experience in romance and the spectrum that we get to experience in this story. And she just does it in a way that you care and you want Sudden to not have to hide her little light under a bush. We don't want that. We don't want that. And you get to see her wrestle with that. And you get to see him wrestle with his own demons, if you will. And for them to get to a place where they can have the happiness that the romance promises. So when we see that, and then we know that this is promised to happily ever after, we're thinking, how in the heck is she going to be able to pull this off? Yeah. And then we keep reading and keep turning pages.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Were there any other key points that you wanted to make sure that you highlighted before we wrap our discussion and our overview for Broken Harbor?
I would say no, other than the thing that I sort of say almost in every episode, so I might as well kick it off here, which is this story is not one that I would say, oh my God, it's my absolute favorite story of all time. And I'm going to reread this story over and over again just because I love it so much. Like I always think of that girl for I'm going to love it, squeeze it, and hold it so tight. It's not that. However, this is a story that I would recommend over and over and over and over and over again because of these reasons. And that's why I think us having this conversation of just like, don't let the romantic suspense fool you. Don't let the romance fool you. Like allow yourself to sort of let those things come down for a second and lean into some really good storytelling. That she takes some things that are really complicated to pull off and she makes it look easy. And while she's making it look easy, we get the benefit. So if you're someone who writes in this space, or you are someone that you wrestle with openings and closings or setups and payoffs, if that's you, then I would say like roll up your sleeves and lean in. This is a great audiobook. The book itself holds your attention. It is steamy, so there are things that are steamy scenes that are on the page. I would even say it holds true to being a small town romance, that it's a slow burn, even though there is a lot of chemistry and you just have all of the great makings of a fantastic story that, again, you would recommend, you would read again, you'd want to study, you'd want to lean into.
Yeah, awesome. All right. Well, thank you everyone so much for joining us for our overview of Broken Harbor by Catherine Cowles. We will be back next week where we will kick off our discussion of the plot And let me tell you, it is a good one, and it's a robust episode. So we have a lot of good stuff for you coming up in plot. So be sure to come back here, same time, same place, next week for that discussion. You can visit us online at storydeepdive.com, where you can also find out, you can see our latest episodes. You can find out more about Dana at Danja Tales or myself at Story Cipher. Don't forget to leave us a rating and review, or give us a like on YouTube. Drop us a comment. Let us know if you've read this book, if you love this book, if you have questions about this book. And subscribe. Also, subscribing is a thing that you can do, and you should do it.
Yes.
I've got the mental checklist. I'm like, bam, 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 one after the other. So thank you so much for joining us today. Like I said, we'll be back next week, and we'll look forward to seeing you there. But until then, as always, happy writing.